It's the end of the 1990s. Monster battling games were in full swing. Pokemon was on its way to becoming a global media juggernaut, and more niche games like Monster Rancher and Jade Cocoon were rounding out the edges of the genre. Monsterseed is one of these games. It's a mostly forgotten monster breeding tactical RPG developed by NK System and published by Sunsoft in 1998 to varied reviews. I could hardly find anything online about this game, which surprised me because I was obsessed with it when I was 5 or 6 years old. The disc was scratched, so I would only play until the game froze, which was about 30 minutes in, and restart from the beginning over and over. I finally played through the whole game recently, and it's not exactly a hidden gem, but I don't think it deserves this level of obscurity. So I played through a second time to get footage, downloaded the freest video editor I could find, and got to work. So without further ado, Monsterseed, the forgotten PS1 monster battler. Monsterseed has 3D characters on a pre-rendered background. I'm a big sucker for this kind of style, and some of the areas are pretty good. None of them are especially breathtaking, but I didn't find any areas hard to look at either. The real tragedy is the character portraits. They can range from a little bit jank to horrendous. But this is a monster fighting game. How are the monster designs? This is getting into a bit more subjective territory, but I think they're pretty good. There's a nice spread of designs. You got your cool guys, the cute mascots. This guy's just a weird dog. And then there's my personal favorite, the freaks. I love these guys, just off-the-wall weirdos that really earn the title monster. Monsterseed has a lot of them, too. Let's start up the game and see what it's got for us. Nice. After starting a new game, we meet our protagonist, Daniel. He's a ruler, which means he can keep and control monsters. The first scene starts with him telling us that he'll get to the town of Len Ball after getting through this mountain trail. We run into a couple of people on the trail and overhear bits of their conversation before we're spotted. They start interrogating us. Did you hear the plan? Are you going to lend ball? And Daniel can't even get a word out before they decide he's better off dead. Now it's time for our first taste of combat. If you think this is going to go anything like the intro cutscene, well, it's not. We don't start with a single monster, so we're outnumbered and get absolutely dumpstered. We wake up in a small house with an old man named Wolf and his granddaughter Cal. Wolf found us dying on the mountain trail and brought us here. He asks Daniel why he doesn't have any monsters despite being a ruler. Apparently Daniel ran out of money while traveling and had to sell all of his monsters to continue. Cal tells us that the town chief can give us a job, and Wolf says he has to get back on the road and heads out. I should probably talk about the translation now, and oh boy, it is not good. This conversation between Daniel and Cal is like watching two aliens pretending to be humans. The dialogue is pretty awkward, but you can at least usually tell what's going on. There is one minor plot point later on that doesn't really make any sense in English though, but the real translation issues come into play during gameplay. There are some systems that I still don't 100% understand after playing through the game twice. For example, there's two negative status effects that both get translated to coma, so sometimes I would use a coma recovery item on a monster only for it to not work because there's two coma recovery items and I used the wrong one. Overall, the translation is probably the biggest obstacle to enjoying Monsterseed. Now back to the game. Daniel insists on finding some way to repay Cal for taking care of him while he was injured, so Cal asks him to find a specific book of children's stories for her. We head outside and there are two monsters waiting for us. They're Cal's pets, and they're jealous that she was taking care of us, and attack. All of the monsters in this game are not only intelligent, they can speak English and carry out full conversations. It makes it really weird that Cal is keeping them like pets like this. Later on, one of them even says that he's taken a bath with her. That is an adult man. He probably has to pay taxes and you're keeping him as a pet. It's especially fucked up that we steal their eggs and make them fight to the death. In battle, some monsters will even beg you to not make them fight. Try not to think about it too hard. You don't actually have to fight these guys. You can just walk right past them and nothing changes. They don't die if you do fight them, but on this playthrough I decided to smoke them anyway. They're both pushovers that go down in 1 or 2 hits. After we're done beating up harmless house pets, we find the chief in the village center. He wants to test us before he can give us a real job, and gives us a handful of Monsterseed to hatch. For our test, we just have to beat all of the low-ranking enemies in the monster arena. This is where the core gameplay loop of Monsterseed starts. You get a job from the chief, hatch some monsters, and do whatever quest he's given you, straight up murdering anyone who gets in your way. Monsterseed does not pull its punches dealing with death. When a monster hits 0 hit points, you have a window of about a turn or two to use a revival item on it, or it dies. Forever. You don't take any prisoners when fighting other rulers either. Those guys are straight up dead. Monsterseed is about Daniel going to a small town in the mountains and committing dozens of state-sanctioned killings. To hatch our seeds into monsters, we have to go to the Solon Fighting Monster item store. We can also buy pre-hatched monsters here, or sell our spare monsters, solutions, and unhatched seeds. The hatching equipment is in the back room, and I really like the vibe in here. The music is ethereal and floaty. The vibe so far has been pretty standard fantasy, but this high-tech incubator looks so out of place, so alien. The only light in the room is coming from the lit doorway, and the darkness means you can't see the walls of the room you're in. It makes you wonder what kind of other technology might be in the room. It all comes together really well and makes you feel like you're somewhere you're not supposed to be, doing mad science in a secret lab. First you select a seed, then any number of solutions, and finally the temperature. The seed determines what type of monster it is. This specific seed is a battling offensive type. This menu will also tell you where you can find the seed and what temperature zones are likely to hatch rejects. Solutions are used to improve the stats of whatever monster you're about to hatch. Every stat has an associated solution that you can find. The temperature affects which specific monster you get. Each seed has a handful of monsters that can hatch from it depending on the temperature. There are some defect monsters at certain temperatures. These have pretty poor stats and bad moves, so I usually sell them. After hatching, you get a few pages of info on the monster. The first page lists the summoning speed, personality type, and a short bestiary entry. Pages 2 and 3 are its stats and elemental affinities. After that is a list of moves the monster can use and their effects. Finally, you choose a name for the monster. I almost always use the recommended name, since you end up hatching a lot of monsters over a playthrough. For this first round of monsters, I hatched this dinosaur dog, Janet, a drill mole that I name Randy, a pig wizard named Bize, and this fire magic beetle thing lovingly named Williams. After that, it's time to head to the battle arena and start my first real battle. Battles take place on a grid, and each character has a number of action points. Moving costs 1 point per square, as do most actions. Attacks use more points depending on how strong they are. Daniel has only 1 attack and it uses 4 points. He has 9 points, so if you're close enough to an enemy at the start of your turn, you can attack twice. On your turn, you have 8 actions you can take. Attack lets you use your Tornado Uppercut move, Standby ends your turn, and Call will begin summoning a monster. Directions will change what orders you've given a monster, and Recovery will unsummon a monster in front of you. Item lets you use an item. Status lets you look at the stats of your or an enemy's monster, and Map lets you look at the whole battlefield. We can try to fight with just Daniel, but this is Monsterseed, not Punching Dogs Simulator, so let's summon some monsters. When you begin summoning, you place a little glowing ball of light that becomes the monster you called after a couple turns. How long this takes depends on the monster's call stat. You can have up to 3 monsters summoned, so I call on Janet, Randy, and Bize for this fight. Bize shows up first, so it's time to give him some directions. Instead of controlling your monsters directly, they act on their own based on directions you give them. There are 5 options: attack, suicide, defense, assistance, and return. Attack is the standard option. The monster will move forward and try to attack enemies in range, usually the closest enemy. But they'll also try to target enemies on low health if they think they can land the killing blow. Suicide makes the monster fight aggressively, and they'll target the enemy ruler. Defense will make them stick close to you and attack any monsters that get close. Assistance will have them prioritize healing and support moves if they have any. And finally, return makes them run back to you so that you can recover them more easily. Attack is pretty much always the best option. I can't think of a time that I felt like I needed to use any of the other commands. Shortly after, everyone else appears and they're all ordered to attack. A detail that I really enjoy is that all the monsters have dialogue that they say during combat, and what they say depends on their personality. Some monsters are full of themselves, some are cowardly, some talk shit if an attack doesn't do much damage. It's a really nice system that helps you get attached to these monsters, but after a few hours of random encounters, it kind of loses its novelty. For ruler battles like this, you can end the fight early if the other ruler is killed, which is what I did here, but in some areas you can encounter groups of wild monsters. In those fights, you'll have to take out all of them or flee. Monsterseed has a bit of an odd stat system. It was common for games from this era to leave important information in the manual, and I managed to get a PDF of monster seeds, but it wasn't always helpful. Things would be translated differently than in the game, and other parts made no sense at all. I think the chart on this page was formatted wrong and got all jumbled up. I think I know what it was supposed to say, but I doubt anyone got to this page and came out with more understanding than before. In the next section, I go through what I've managed to figure out of the game's systems, but if you want to get into the story, you can just skip to here. Every monster has a hidden lifespan stat. Once a monster reaches the end of its lifespan, it dies and can't be revived. If you're lucky, they might unleash a powerful ultimate attack that can wipe out entire enemy teams, but sometimes they just say their farewells and die quietly. There have been a few times where I was losing a battle only for a monster to turn the tide with their ultimate attack. I'm not 100% sure how their age is calculated, but I think there is a random element to it. I think that being downed and revived reduces a monster's lifespan. I'm really torn about this system. On one hand, it was always super exciting to see the ultimate attack, and it makes it worthwhile to keep weaker monster around so you're not wasting your powerful ones on random encounters. It ensures that you're always getting to try out new monsters too. On the other hand, by the end of the game I had seen so many monsters come and go that it was harder to care about any of them. Why would I revive this monster if its lifespan is probably almost up anyway? And a lot of the powerful monsters would end up collecting dust in my inventory because I felt like using them would be a waste. I think it could have been a pretty cool system if some of the numbers were tweaked a little bit. On the stats page, we have Call. It ranges from quite slow to quite fast. A quite fast call speed will usually have a monster spawn right after your turn, but a quite slow call speed can mean the battle is over before they can even show up. Character is a monster's personality. It affects more than their dialogue. Some personalities change their behavior in battle. A lazy monster will stop fighting after a few turns, unless you use an action to give them directions again. A cowardly monster will switch to a defensive strategy if their health gets too low. Feature. Basically the class of the monster. There are 4 main types. First is Battling Offensive. They're the standard melee fighter. They can attack enemies right in front of them and do quite a bit of damage. Magic Attacking type. They use MP, or Spiritual Strength, to cast spells. These are interesting because monsters also die if their spiritual strength reaches 0, and spells can do damage to either HP, MP, or both. Harassment type. These monsters tend to have melee attacks that inflict status effects and magic that lowers enemies' stats. A lot of these guys are cool on paper, but fall short because of the way battles usually play out. A spell that reduces fire defense or max HP by 5 points is neat, but most enemies go down in 2 or 3 hits anyways. It's almost always better to just do damage. I do have a soft spot for these guys since a lot of them are designed to be nasty little freaks. Magic Assist. The opposite of harassment types. They heal and buff allies. They run into the same issues though. The best form of healing is to not take damage, and the easiest way to not take damage is to make the enemy dead. Some of the magic-using monsters are also something called Magic Memory type. You can use certain items to teach these monsters spells that they don't usually know. It's a cool concept, but the poor item descriptions make it hard to know if a spell is good or not. Honestly, Battling Offensive types will do most of the lifting on your team. These class names are pretty awkward to say, so from now on I'll be calling them Fighter, Wizard, and Silly Guy. Magic Assist types don't get a nickname because they're going right in the garbage. Status. If a monster has a negative status effect, it shows here. Life Force and Spiritual Strength, HP and MP respectively. If either hits 0, the monster starts dying. Battling and Spiritual Defense are a little counterintuitive. They're a flat reduction to damage, but until I read the manual I assumed that Battling Defense reduced damage from melee attacks, and Spiritual Defense from spells. Turns out, Battling Defense reduces any HP damage, and Spiritual Defense lowers MP damage. If a spell does damage to HP, then it still rolls against the Battling Defense, and vice versa. This is great news for fighters since they tend to have high Battling Defense anyway, and HP damage is probably the most common. Agility affects turn order, and dodge chance. A monster with high agility gets their turn more often, but you can't see the turn order so you can't plan around it. Monsters can dodge attacks, but attacking them from behind sets their agility and defense to 0 for that attack. This can do a shitload of damage, so make sure your ass is covered. I'm pretty sure spells can't be dodged, but they also can't benefit from attacking from behind. Power of action affects the number of action points per turn. Daniel has 28 power of action and 9 action points, so I'm guessing every 3 power of action gives you 1 point. Notably missing from this page are any kind of offensive stats. Battling and Spiritual Offensive is variable from monster to monster. It's just only shown on the attack page for each move. Next up is the Elemental Merit page. This is another system that I misunderstood for the first half of the game. There are 8 elements: fire, water, ice, electricity, gas, sound, light, and acid. Each spell has an associated element. I thought that a higher affinity meant that they did more damage with that element, but as it turns out, it's their elemental resistance. After regular defense is calculated, elemental damage is reduced by a further percentage based on the defender's resistance. This is another fat L for wizards because their spells have to get through 2 layers of defense before doing damage. The more I write this script, the more I realize that they really got the shaft. Spellcasting sucks, and you're better off punching people in the back of the head. Finally, we have a list of attacks. These pages show an attack's name, how much damage it does to HP and MP, and to elemental type. The grid on the right shows an attack's range. The arrow is the monster using the attack, and the red squares are where it can target. Here's another thing I had to figure out on my own. Under the targeting grid, it'll either say substance or range. Substance means that an attack will hit one target, but a range attack will hit every single square it can target, including allies. Friendly fire is reduced a lot, so your monsters won't go accidentally killing each other. Being able to hit multiple enemies isn't bad, so that's half a point for wizards, but they're still on thin ice. There's a submenu below this page that gives a short description of the attack and any status changes or effects it can cause. Monsterseed tries to convince you that you have a lot of control over these stats during the hatching process, but in the end it's still pretty much all up to chance. I've used up all of my solutions on a single monster only for it to still have pretty low stats. I think the lifespan system could be improved with a new iteration. Maybe instead of dying at the end of its lifespan, a monster could have several of its stats lowered when it reaches a certain age. Or if you're lucky, it could grow stronger with age. Ultimately, I just wish the stats mattered more. A lot of the difficult fights can be beaten if you just throw enough of your monsters at them. But it's about time I get back to the story. So from here on out, consider this spoiler territory. I proved my worth by beating up Simon a couple more times and returned to the chief to get the first job. Mao, a traveling monster merchant, was captured by a gang of robbers. Mao is from Len Ball, so he wants us to break into their newly built fortress and rescue him. The chief thinks they captured him because he was selling a new type of monster seed, and they want to know where he gets it. He gives us the first half of the payment and some more seeds. First I hatch this silly little guy. I love his design, and his melee attack has a chance to turn monsters to stone, which is an insta-kill. His name is Kingsley, like the king that he is. I also hatch a couple more monsters, but they're total duds. First is this duck whose description says it smells like wet dog, and a magic assist type. They're both allowed to come with, but they can't sit at the cool kids table. I head to the fortress, and this was as far as I could get as a kid before the game froze. My entire experience of this game was getting as far into the monster arena as I could before I either ran out of monsters or died. It was very satisfying to finally see what the inside was after all these years. Whenever you enter a dungeon, the chest locations and their loot are randomized. This one had $2 and something called a biter aid. Probably something you put on your dentures. We meet a gang member in a random encounter, and look at the guy. You can tell it's his first day because they've got him wearing a Spirit Halloween costume and a diaper. Me and the lads kill him dead and move on. Past some poorly hidden spike traps, the next room has 3 doors. The door to the right leads to a small library that has the book that Cal wants. I bumble around a bit more looking for chests. Remember these doors. We'll come back here later. By now I've had my fill of piddling around the dungeon, so I head back to Cal's house. Her pets are still alive and they don't have anything important to say. We give Cal the book, and now she says that she's always wanted a blue necklace. Daniel responds with, "Well, you are a girl, so I understand." Smooth. He also asks what she knows about Ball's Fortress. She tells us that it was built by the Black Rope Gang. Remember that she's the one that told us this. It's important later. According to her, they used to rob travelers in the mountains, but they built the fortress when they found out that monster seeds were buried in Jedda's mine. It's never really explained, but apparently monster seeds are mined from the earth, not, laid. So the Black Rope Gang is using the fortress to more easily raid monster seeds from the mine. Daniel doubts this information for whatever reason, and asks if that's a fact. She responds with, "It's a woman's reasoning," and I think the phrase the translator was going for is a woman's intuition. But enough hanging out with girls. It's time to rescue the merchant. Now that Cal has the book, this guy spawns. You can tell it's not his first day because his armor's orange. Not important enough for pants though. His name is Carrie, and he and Daniel try out the cool one-liners they've been practicing before the fight. His first 2 monsters go down in 2 hits, but now Randy is by himself because the 2 corpses can't be walked over until they disappear. So we have to sit back and watch him get wailed on while we wait. The path opens up when his health is very low, but it's too late. Before my turn comes up, the enemy strikes him down. Carrie's last monster is summoned, and a few turns later, Randall's body disappears. I clean up the last monster, and Janet finishes off the ruler in a 1v1. Daniel calls him a disgrace and an idiot. I'm not even joking, that's what he says. And he tells us there are stronger rulers ahead, and that we'll regret not being beaten here. I just hope they start wearing pants. He drops a key to the door, but I've got a bunch of monster seeds burning a hole in my pocket, so I go back to town again to hatch monsters and buy supplies. You may have noticed by now that some of this footage is a lot faster than the rest. That's because I played most of this game at double speed. You probably can't tell because of the editing, hopefully, but Monsterseed is a slow-ass game. The menus, the animations, dialogue boxes, fading in, fading out, everything takes so long. Random encounters can be over 10 minutes long, sometimes 20. I'm a busy guy, I got places to be. I've got to get to my day job at the ball crushing factory. If it wasn't for the speed toggle, this video definitely wouldn't have been made. The locked door leads to a stairwell that goes down to the dungeon. This room has some swinging axe traps, and after getting past them, we meet another guy in orange who calls me a crybaby and tries to take my lunch money. Some monsters go down, but I use some Fenny wings. this game's legally distinct Phoenix Downs, because I want all hands on deck for the fight with the jailer later. There's a bloody torture chamber in an execution room, with an even still twitching body in the guillotine. I find the jailer Tyson, and I remember this fight being really hard. Bizet goes down pretty fast, so I get in there and accidentally recover my other monster, because apparently it's my first time using a controller. Luckily, Jenna and I are able to tear ass through the monsters with just 2 of us. Then the enemy AI does something I'd never seen before, and it actually recovers one of his own monsters. Maybe he did it accidentally too. I summon another monster to pull aggro, and it's only a matter of time before Tyson dies. He tries to threaten me the same way the guy upstairs did, but he dies before he can get it out. The key gets us into the prison, but Mao is ignoring us. If my character portrait looked like this, I probably wouldn't say much either. There's a lever nearby that opens up his jail cell, and now that he's out, he'll talk to me. The Black Rope Gang's been torturing him, and he thought we were one of them. Daniel asks what the secret is, and Mao tells us about Dark Seed. It's a special type of monster seed that's mined in secret and hatches incredibly rare monsters. He can't tell us where it's mined, but he does give us a couple of them before he leaves. I head back to town for a new job, and this notice board catches my attention. There's no info on it right now, but I make a point to check it every time I'm in town. The chief gives us our payment and tells us to go rest before he gives us the next job. Daniel says that he'll go visit Cal, and the chief has a misunderstanding about their relationship. I head over to Cal's, and Daniel asks if she's said anything to the chief about them, and then he gets all flustered like a middle schooler. Luckily, that was enough to fulfill our contractual obligation for conversation, so I head back to the town square. He tries to convince the chief that they weren't doing a horizontal 2-person conga line, but he doesn't believe us. The next job is to find an herb in Jetta's mine for the owner of the item store. Jetta's mine is a total maze. A lot of the rooms look really similar, and I still get lost no matter how many times I run through there. There's a few minecart stations that can be used to get to and from the deeper parts quickly, but only one station on each of the lines is active at any time. So if you aren't careful, you can end up needing to take the long way because the minecart is still at the other stop. There are a few chests along the minecart paths that you can grab if you jump off at the right time. The blue necklace for Cal is in this golden chest. I mess up the timing the first time, so I have to run over to the other side, take the cart back to the other station, then ride it again from there to get the necklace. I don't actually know if this one is required to progress like the book was, but I'm not taking any chances. This time Cal asks for the blue ring and promises it's the last thing. We then ask her what she knows about the Jetta's mine. She tells us there are 4 gangs. The Black Rope Gang is the strongest, and the other 3 are the Burning Hell Gang, the Krishna Party, and the Lulava Party. The Lulava Party was supposedly wiped out by the Black Rope Gang half a year ago, and the other 2 gangs are too weak to go against them. There are Black Rope Gang members deeper in the mines, while the surface only has wild monsters. Encounters with wild monsters are interesting, because they all start on the field instead of being summoned. If you get unlucky and they get the first move in the encounter, you can take damage before you even get to have a turn. It's a good idea to go for quicker summons over strong monsters. Since there's no enemy ruler, you'll be at an advantage once all your monsters are summoned, since you outnumber them 4-3. Near the end of this section, there's a map with a hole in the center that only flying monsters can move over. I wish there were more interesting maps like this. There's an exit here that leads to an outcropping with the herb on it. There's a minecart nearby that can take us to the entrance, and on the ride we pass by a bridge over a deep chasm that we haven't seen yet. I give the herb to the item store owner, and he can now make monster items. Monster items can be used to increase a specific stat on a monster, but a few other stats will randomly be changed too. The rabbit in front of Cal's house told me that they also shorten a monster's lifespan, so I almost never use them. The next job is to root out robbers deeper in the mine. The path is blocked off, so the chief gives us a key to a storeroom that should have some dynamite. He has to look for the key first, so he tells us to go visit Cal while we wait. While we're there, she tells us more about the Black Rope Gang. Their leader is named Murdoch, who killed the previous leader, Hardy. After he took over, they became a much more violent and aggressive group. Cal gets weird, and it's obvious that she's crushing on Daniel, but it's been a few hours since he's punched someone's dog, so he runs off before she can finish. I get the key from the chief, check the notice boards, and head back to the mine. After a bit of faffing about in the mines, we find a bridge from earlier. The caves in here are moist and covered in moss. It's a nice change of scenery. Eventually, we find the storeroom and get the dynamite. We head back to the blockage, and this was all that was in the way? We didn't need dynamite for this, we just needed like a crowbar. I'm pretty sure I've got a monster with crowbar hands. Save me a trip to Menards. Inside, there's a sign warning that cave-ins are possible in this area. It's a good thing we took the gentle approach to getting in. We walk about 30 steps, and wouldn't you know it, there's a cave-in. The way back is blocked, so we have to move forward. The next few rooms are completely dark, and you can only see a small circle around Daniel. There's a few chests in the area, but a lot of them are traps. I open every single one still, because a few spike traps aren't going to stop me from getting to the real chests. There's a break in the darkness when you reach some kind of massive brick silo. I like this map. You can hear a strong wind blowing and you can't see the bottom from this camera angle. It gives you a nice sense of height. And the walkway is narrow enough that a couple monsters can completely block it, letting your wizard safely cast spells from the back line. It would have been cool if flyers could go off of the platform, but they can't. After this room, it's back to the darkness. There's an elevator further in that can bring us to before the cave-in, so we can leave if we want to. But I'm in pretty good shape, so I take the elevator to the next area instead. Remember when I mentioned there's a part that doesn't translate well into English? The conversations with this guy are it. Here's the beginning of the dialogue. And here's what he says after you beat him. Japanese has 3 different writing systems: hiragana, katakana, and kanji. Hiragana and katakana are pretty simple. Each symbol represents a syllable, like ni or sa. Kanji are a bit more complicated, though. They're Chinese characters that are used to represent concepts instead of raw speaking sounds. They can also be read in different ways depending on the context, called different readings. It's revealed later that Cal gets all of her information on the gangs by peeking at her grandfather's journal. So what I'm guessing is that she either used the wrong reading or mistook the character completely. This scene makes Cal look a lot more stupid in the English translation than in the original. In English, if you read Black Hell Association as Burning Rope Gang, I think you're illiterate. But in Japanese, I think it's pretty forgivable. I mean, there's thousands of kanji, some have a dozen different readings, and just look how similar they can be. Also, when the goon is dying, he gets the name backwards too, but I assume that's just a translation issue. The rough stone of the caves gives way to ancient brick walls and broken pillars, and eventually we find who we're looking for. Black Rope Gang Deputy Dryden? What the hell? Yeah, even after the reveal of the gang's actual name, the game keeps calling it the Black Rope Gang for the rest of the story. Who knows why? Dryden recognizes us as the loser from the mountain path and tells us that Murdoch is going to be the one to rule this country. This fight is actually pretty hard. He has a few strong monsters, but the real threat is Dryden himself. The man hits like a truck and has just as much health. Luckily, I've got Janet with me, who's still an absolute beast. His first 2 monsters go down pretty quickly, but his third, Janet's evil twin, is able to take out one of mine. Williams and I are able to finish him off, while Janet and Dryden begin trading blows. But it's obvious Dryden's got him outmatched. One hit from him takes him down to below half health. I heal Janet, but Dryden is able to get 2 monsters out, so I've got my hands full pretty quickly. He's able to do 2 attacks in a row and brings Janet down from full to 0 in 1 turn. His last words are, "It's sad, but this is the end. Keep up the good work when I'm gone." Except there's no way I'm letting that happen. We're gonna need him up to keep me from getting overwhelmed. After reviving him, Dryden gets another double hit in, but Janet gets lucky and manages to tank it. Finally, I'm able to summon Neural, one of the monsters I got from the Dark Seed earlier. But it turns out I didn't even need him, because Janet pulls through. In a last-ditch effort, Janet gathers up the last of his life force and unleashes his ultimate attack against Dryden before disappearing forever. Dryden's so tanky that he manages to survive with 3 hit points remaining. But with a single punch, I'm able to finish what Janet started. Dryden gets up and runs to the exit, and we say that Jetta's mine and the town are under our protection, and that Murdoch is next. Dryden threatens to lynch us, oh my god, and runs away. Daniel recognizes the coat of arms on the floor and grabs a tablet with the same symbol from a nearby pedestal. We also get the copper key. There's a nice shortcut that brings us back to the elevator and back to town quickly. There's nothing on the notice board, and the chief gives us our reward. He doesn't give us a new job, so I head to Cal's for a bit. This is where she tells us that she read all the information from the journal. The shopkeeper can give us more info about the stone tablet we found. He says it's from a time before humans were civilized. It was made by people from a different world and given to the few humans that were allowed to meet them, who worshipped them. The coat of arms on it is still used by some people even today. We try again to convince the chief that there's nothing going on with Cal, and the chief says that she's always talking about him when he's gone. He straight up tells Daniel that she's in love with him, and Daniel still doesn't believe it. So we head over to Cal's house to get to the bottom of this mess, and her monster pets tell us that she's been kidnapped by the Black Rope Gang. Dryden was there and left a message for us. If we want to see her again, go to Ball's Fortress. Daniel sends the pets to go get her grandfather right away. But on the way to the fortress, I check the notice board. I might be in a rush, but there's always time to check. But there's still nothing. While I'm there, I tell the chief the situation, and he makes it an official job to go rescue Cal. I fight through Ball's Fortress and find these doors from all the way back at the beginning of the game. The copper key opens one and I can continue. There's some gnarly traps in this section and a decent amount of chests, including one with a silver key that opens the other locked door. There's a bunch of encounters on the way, but eventually I find the dungeon that she's being held in. But I need a key. Dryden is waiting for us outside. This fight is also pretty hard, and this time I don't have Janet to back me up. I lose a lot of monsters. Even Kingsley, who was the last left from the original crew. Eventually I'm left with no monsters on the field at one point, but I'm able to bring out reinforcements. But they go down pretty quickly too. I end up losing 7 monsters, but eventually we beat Dryden for the final time. The key he drops isn't for the cell, so I have to keep looking. Eventually I fall through a hole in the floor that brings me closer to the entrance, which is actually good because I barely have enough monsters to keep going, so I head back to town. Then something amazing happens. I check the notice board, and it says, Traveling Item Dealer, Business at Jetta's Mine. In my first playthrough of the game, I never saw this. There are a couple walkthroughs for the game, and neither of them mention this traveling salesman either. I completely forget about rescuing Cal and run over to the mine and start looking for him. Eventually finding him was a magical moment for me. My obsessive checking of the notice board finally paid off, and I found something that I don't think has been documented online yet. It makes me wonder what other kind of obscure things there are in the game. His selection of items isn't super exciting, but he does sell a monster item that increases lifespan, which is pretty cool. I head back to town with a spring in my step, and what the heck, I'll check the sign again and... holy shit. Traveling seed dealer. There's another traveling salesman in the mine. Do you think it's the one we rescued from Ball's Fortress? I head back to Jetta's mine again. A short search later, and there he is. It's Mao, and he's selling a handful of monster seeds. We're not done yet, though. There's a third salesman who sells already hatched monsters. These ones are a bit rarer than the ones you can buy in town. I did some testing, and here's how I think it works. Once you reach a certain point, I assume once you go through all 3 sections of the mine, merchants can start spawning. Every time you leave an area, there's a chance for one of the merchants to spawn. The exact spot is random, but each merchant stays in their respective area of the mine. The items dealer in the main area, Mao in the temple area, and the monster dealer in the mossy part of the mines. We've still got a bit of ground to cover in Ball's Fortress, like this room full of suits of armor that throw axes, and this spear trap that needs to be turned off upstairs. Eventually we find the Lord of the Fortress, Byron. Daniel demands the key to Cal's cell, but he refuses, as they need her to be a decoy. Daniel's confused because he's already here, and Byron reveals that she's not bait for us. She's bait for her grandfather, Wolf. Wolf was the leader of the Lulava party. The gang leaders of this region always pass leadership on to a successor, but Wolf retired without naming anybody. Byron doesn't have anything else to say, so we get to work. He's got some pretty tough-looking monsters, with knife hands and elbow blades, and they rip through my stock. Luckily, I've got a surplus of bodies to throw at them. After enough brute forcing, he runs out of monsters and gets dogpiled. Finally, he drops the key and we rescue Cal. Wolf is waiting for us back home, and he wants to have a private talk with us. Cal is a bit miffed about not being able to be part of the conversation, but he makes her go upstairs anyway. Wolf tells us that Murdoch is after the Condol statue that he has. He asks if Daniel believes in the otherworld civilization. He doesn't believe, but Wolf insists that it's true and that the statue is related to it. There are 4 statues, and they can be brought together to open a way to the other world. There's an evil giant Monsterseed there that can hatch the Beast of Chaos. Murdoch wants to use the Beast of Chaos to rule the world. Daniel starts coming around to the idea of the other world. The other statues are with Cindy of the Krishna Party, Meredith of the Burning Hell Gang, and Murdoch has the last one. Daniel has the idea to gather up all of the statues himself and see the Chaos Beast for himself. Wolf gives him the first statue and we head out. The gang hideouts are all on the Fimmel Mountain Trail. This area is probably more confusing than the mines. It's super easy to get lost, and I wandered around for more than an hour on my first playthrough. We have to visit all 4 of the gang hideouts. Luckily, I don't think you have to visit them all in order. Near the start, there's some weird machinery, and later on, a temple that we can't get into yet, so we have to move on. In this playthrough, I find the Krishna hideout first. After taking care of the guard, I head inside and Cindy is waiting for me. She says that Wolf told her to give us the statue, but she wants to test us first. After winning, she says that she respects Wolf because of how strong he is. We take the second statue from the basement of the hideout. There are some ruins that need a key to pass through, and eventually I find it in the abandoned Lulava Party hideout. The next hideout is blocked by some water, so I open a sluice gate and find the Black Rope Gang hideout. The statue isn't here, and Daniel deduces that it's with Murdoch. Last up is the Burning Hell Gang. The guard assumes that I'm a Black Rope goon and attacks. We beat him and explain to the leader that we want to stop Murdoch. This guy wants to test us too, but I eke out a win and take the statue. Now that we have the statues, Murdoch will be waiting for us at the temple. This fight is a scripted loss. I tried really hard to beat him here, but I think the game starts to cheat if you're close to winning. Eventually one of my monsters hits him and he just doesn't take any damage. Either way, we lose here and Wolf has to rescue us again. Murdoch took all of the statues from us and can get to the other world. Wolf tells us that we're probably the only one who can beat him. Daniel doesn't lose hope, so we head to the temple. Murdoch was here first. There are 4 statues and a secret entrance is still open. To make progress in this area, you have to push the statue into position while arrows shoot at you from a hole in the wall. I tried to dodge them, but ended up just tanking the damage. This whole area is full of ancient tools and art. There's a lot more detail here compared to the other ones, but it's mostly a transitional area. There are a lot of puzzles and traps, but no story encounters. But there's a couple snakes in this room. That's pretty neat. Eventually, we find some machinery that looks just like the ones on the mountain trail. But before we can reach it, the floor falls out from under us for like the 3rd time this game. When we land, it doesn't look like the temple we were just in. It's some kind of high-tech sci-fi facility. There are unhatched monster seeds everywhere, and the bulkheads between rooms are very insect-like. I'm a big fan of this area. Daniel deduces that we've made it to the otherworld civilization. The way everyone was talking about it, I kind of assumed we need to open a portal or take a teleporter or something, but I guess the other world is just underground. I managed to find a teleporter that brings us to the mountain trail. After some more exploring and teleporter shenanigans, we find the giant monster seed. We're above it though, so we need to find a way down. When we do, Murdoch is waiting for us, and if we stop him here, he won't be able to hatch the beast. There's surprisingly little dialogue before this fight. They don't waste any time on monologuing and just get straight to business. I like it. It adds a sense of finality to the fight. He's powerful here too, but since the game isn't cheating this time, he goes down. But we were too late. The monster seed is hatching in the next room. Murdoch stands up, declares his victory, and runs off. We're then forced to listen to these sound effects that go on for way too long. So yeah, Murdoch is dead, and we have to fight the Beast of Chaos. In the first phase, he has just 2 shoulders that cast magic. Once they're both dead, he disconnects from the wall, and the fight starts for real. He infinitely summons 2 hands, and has a nasty tail swipe attack that hits multiple targets. I actually lost the first time because my monsters kept coming back to me and asking to be recalled. None of them had the lazy personality, so I don't know why it happened. The second attempt goes a little better, and I'm barely able to beat him. Now that Murdoch and the Beast of Chaos are dead, Daniel starts the teleporter in the next room and steps inside. If you watched this whole thing, seriously, thank you so much. I have a problem with finishing projects and things in general, and so this video was really more for me than for anyone else, just to be able to finish something and be done with it. So there's a lot of parts that I'm not super happy with, but I just kept going because I knew it'd never be done otherwise. But seriously, it took months, but it was, in the end, I think a lot of fun. If you have the chance to make something, just try to make yourself do it. Big thanks to all my friends and my dad especially for putting up with me while I make this and supporting me. It definitely made it a lot easier to be able to talk to them about how much of a pain it is and have them listen to me complain. My dad's probably heard everything I said in this video 3 times just for me talking about it. I don't really know if I'm going to make something like this again. If I do, it'll hopefully be a lot shorter. But again, seriously, thank you so much for watching this.